Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Westfox. Now, you may have seen in a previous video, Westfox and Shepard discussing the celebration of life with Doctor Who. I was unable to join at the time, however, after watching their video, I felt there were a few things I wanted to say, a few things I wish to add, and because I can't keep my mouth shut, I felt that I should also do my own video as an addendum to theirs. So, without further ado, the first thing I wanted to mention is that as our beginning instruction from Westfox was to choose 3 different monologues that we wanted to present as what we felt were the best showcases of the Doctor. Of course, when you use the term monologue, the first thing that pops into your mind is Matt Smith. His Doctor was by far the wordiest. That Doctor would never shut up. Seriously. And he differentiated himself from the David Tennant Doctor by being so eloquent. And there, by no means would I disagree that Matt Smith is a great orator. That being said, I actually believe that his speeches near their end fall flat quite commonly, and I wouldn't blame him. It's an issue of the writing, because it is hard to end what we consider an epic speech or a monologue with drive and intention. And I actually believe that many of his, if you look at the last 5, 10, 15 seconds, the last few lines of any of his monologues, actually end up falling flat. And it's actually the emotional fervor of Murray Gold's compositions and what you're seeing on screen that really heightened up that moment. And I even agree with that in my final choice, which we'll see at the very end of this video, of what I actually think is probably one of the best monologues given, and it's not by Matt Smith, it's actually by Capaldi. And when I get there, I'll emphasize on why I disagree and agree with what's actually being said. However, I feel as far as a long piece of text that a Doctor has stringed along, it is probably one of the most efficient and effective monologues that have been written, which is saying something, because that period of Doctor Who was poorly written, and I really do feel bad for Capaldi, because I really think he had an earnest desire and a love for the character of Doctor Who, and in truth, I think he really got the short end of the stick. So, putting the caveat of Matt Smith out, because we're not going to see any Matt Smith, and then that final, what Capaldi one would we see at the end, I just wanted to touch on where I think the Doctor actually has most of his strengths, and I wouldn't call them monologues, but what they actually are short epithets of his character that's produced into words. Usually it has to do with fighting, the war, because that's the time period that we've landed ourselves in here during this time period. And in that stream, I would say David Tennant has the strongest character building language. And again, if we harken back to Shakespeare, which we also run into during the David Tennant era, is that brevity is the soul of wit. And again, I understand that writers are also involved, and it takes a group effort to bring these things to life, but the actor's the one that eventually has to take what he has and turn it into the best that he can. And again, that's where Matt Smith does an excellent job, even with what I would believe is a subpar monologue. The advantage for David Tennant was that the lines were very pithy and small. And just like as Westfox brought up, one of the best lines in all Doctor Who is actually spoken by the War Doctor, by Johnhurt. Great men are forged in fire, and it is the privilege of lesser men to light the flame. That is an incredibly poignant and epic thing to say. And here it is, kind of almost as a throwaway line given to a interim Doctor that didn't exist until he was invented by the 50th anniversary. So something like that just goes to show you that sometimes it doesn't need to be big and grandiose. The pithy lines are oftentimes the ones that are the most striking. And that's kind of what I wanted to bring up for this conversation. So first, we're actually going to start off with something that was brought up at with the previous, with West Fox and Shepard. And it's one that when anyone gets a few minutes to kind of consider and think about, always brings up the conversation where David Tennant talks about, I should be the master of time. And then, of course, the penultimate moment of being Time Lord victorious. It is probably one of the most passionate moments. First, while on Mars, saying that I'm the one who should be able to have the mastery of time. And here he has this passionate moment. And then the cold, calculating, I've made my decision and I'm going to stick to it without any type of separation, I'm not going to even deviate from this because I am so sure in my mind, and it's a cold, calculating way. And I think it really, really does speak to the character of the Doctor, and again, to the poignancy of having quick and brief statements which have more impact. So we're going to watch that right now.
Yes, because there are laws. There are laws of time. And once upon a time, there were people in charge of those laws, but they died. They all died. Do you know who that leaves? Me! It's taken me all these years to realize the laws of time are mine, and they will obey me!
The future of the human race. No one should have that much power.
Tough.
Adelaide, I've done this sort of thing before. In small ways, save some little people. But never someone as important as you. Oh, I'm good. For a long time now, I thought I was just a survivor, but I'm not. I'm the winner. That's who I am. The Time Lord victorious.
And there's no one to stop you.
No.
That's for me to decide. No, you'd better get home. Oh, it's all locked up. You've been away. Still, that's easy. All yours.
Is there nothing you can't do?
Not anymore.
So here we have the ultimate level of hubris that we have seen from the Doctor. Now, I will say, one of the parts that I actually hate about this entire scene, that whole build-up, is the unbelievable pride and arrogance of the, I guess you could say, the antagonist character of the female. I don't remember her name. But she has the audacity to tell the Doctor what he can and cannot do, and then in a show of spite, to spite the Doctor's choices, she goes and commits suicide. That's insane, and that is, in my opinion, very poor writing. I think there would have been far more effective ways to showcase the Doctor's folly in trying to control the world that he's been exposed to with the loss. I mean, we've seen the loss of Rose, and the kind of Martha, and then of course Donna being one of the most painful losses that he suffers, second to Rose. Because it's kind of one of those burning aches. He sees her in the future, and here she is wandering around, living that humdrum life that she had lived previously, and with no experience of the Doctor being around, which is heartbreaking. So here he is. He's like, I'm finally going to take control of everything. And I think her storyline is silly, that she would then kill herself to try to prove the Doctor wrong, when she could have just lived out her life and exactly as he mentioned, expose her granddaughter to these things to push her future and to build it, as opposed to, well, I'm just going to kill myself. Because let's be honest, imagine the tragic and the tragedy that would have for a grandchild to see or know that their grandmother killed herself, and the exposure that would have been for her kids to see her dead body, as opposed to her being lost in space. Or of course the opportunity that David Tennant presents, being able to actually live and be able to enjoy the rest of her life. It wasn't like it was going to be that long anyway. So removing that silliness aside, this is probably one of the best, most passionate moments from the Doctor, that he has finally been he himself, even through the Time War, even through all the other stuff he's been through, has finally been pushed emotionally to the brink, where he wants to take control of everything. And as we'll see later on, he finally has a cathartic release that hurts him, and recognizes how terrible that was and why being alone, and there's a little hint, is so destructive to him. Now, for our next scene that we're going to discuss, which I also think brings apart a character of the Doctor that we don't get to see often, and this may come as a surprise, is actually going to be Paul McGann. Now, when I first saw The Night of the Doctor, I was actually very, very impressed by excuse me. I was very impressed by Paul McGann's performance. I actually was so struck that this guy had inserted himself in there and so seamlessly melded himself into someone that completely plays off of the Doctor. You're like, whoa, this was actually very impressive. It actually caused me to want to go watch the movie. The movie's terrible. It is painful to watch, and objectively, it is just one of those movies that you grit yourself along, and it's not very good. However, Paul McGann plays an excellent Doctor, and ironically enough, he actually kind of plays an intermediary between an Eccleston type Doctor and a David Tennant in the beginning type Doctor. He does an excellent job, and then we'll see in this next scene the war, avoiding the war, but the tired, the forlorn, the rubbed raw Paul McGann gets exposed, and you have this sardonic, sarcastic, flippant character playing on one side. On the other hand, this passionate, caring, devoted person still in this scene. And I think he completely nails what it means and brings out in small little snippets, as we'll see here, these what the heart of the Doctor really is. This conflicted personality that wrestles back and forth, but yet can actually live harmoniously when directed in a positive way. So let's take a look at that right now.
Don't worry, it's bigger on the inside.
What did you say? Bigger on the inside, is that what you said?
Yes, come on, you'll love it.
Is this a TARDIS?
Yes, but you'll be perfectly safe, I promise you.
Don't touch me!
I'm not part of the war. I swear to you, I never was.
You're a Time Lord.
Yes, I'm a Time Lord, but I'm one of the nice ones.
Get away from me!
Oh, look on the bright side, I'm not a Dalek. For a minute. That's ages. What if I get bored? I need a television, couple of books, any more but chess. Bring me knitting. Hang on. Is it you? Am I back on Khan? You're the Sisterhood of Khan. Keepers of the flame of utter boredom.
Eternal life.
That's the one. It's not my war. I will have no part of it.
So?
I call myself the Doctor.
It's the same thing in your mind.
I'd like to think so. I would rather die.
You're dead already.
Warrior.
Warrior?
I don't suppose there's any need for a doctor anymore. Make me a warrior now.
I took the liberty of preparing this one myself.
Get out! Get out! All of you. Will it hurt?
Yes.
Good. Charlie, Carey's, Lucy, Tamsin, Molly. Friends, companions I've known, I salute you. And Cass, I apologize. Physician, heal thyself.
So in this moment, we have a lot of little snippy dialogues. I wanted to trim it down for time. And of course, in the beginning, we have this, very eccentric Doctor comes in, and he's very, ooh. That's right. Little did you know that this isn't a $10 million production. It's actually $22.67. So I get my money's worth. Anyway, what you find out with the Doctor here is he still has this kind of, and I use the term flamboyant, not in the homosexual type of way, but in the whimsical type of way. You know, he comes in, he's like, I'm the powerhouse, but he's also like, you know, why are you still here? Oh, so interesting, blah, 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 blah. And we don't see that scene in there because I needed to cut it for time. But as he walks Kes to the back of the ship, then there's that dawning light on her, and he's first trying to play it cool and convince her, and then the serious nature of the Doctor kicks in. He goes, you know, I'm not a part of the war. Yes, I'm a Time Lord, but I'm one of the good ones. Well, at least I'm not a Dalek. Well, who can tell anymore? You know, those things are kind of tragic in his mind. And he's, because of that final conversation, when he finally lands himself on Karn, he's saying, you know what? I don't want to be in this war. I refuse. I've avoided. I've done everything I can to not participate because I don't want to be there. And eventually he does get convinced. But one of the more amusing parts before he gets convinced is that little quip where he gets told he's a little less than 4 minutes. And he's like, oh, think of all the things I can do. That's a key little takeaway on what the mind of a Time Lord is that time is something that's so physically conscious to them. 4 minutes might as well be a lifetime to him. And I think that's a great little line, a great little quip. And then at the very end, I think is one of the most powerful moments where he has to change the dichotomy that he's wanted to live by his entire life, and takes on this warrior mantled mindset. And because he takes that on, he's casting away the Doctor, at least as the 50th anniversary would show us. And yet he asks an important question: is this going to hurt? And the reason he's asking that question is because he wants to make sure that what he does is, he doesn't agree with what he wants, but he already wants to be penitent. He's already looking like a corporal punishment. You know, he's flailing himself in the back. He's like, will this hurt? Good. I need to be this, participate in my punishment for having to make this choice, make this decision to do this. And I love when he yells, when he's like, you know, get out. You know, and then there's that boiling point, and then it tapers right back down. I think it's an excellent performance from Paul McGann. And again, those little poignant moments and sections give you little understandings of how the Doctor views the world. And he does. He always beats himself up eventually. There's that self-loathing that's always inside that character based on what he's had to do post the Time War. And of course, during that time, that would be the central part of it. And it's an excellent reevaluation. There is, while I say don't use Doctor Who to teach you about your life, there is something you could take value from that, in that introspection is important. Now, anything can be taken too far extreme, but there is something that does need to monitor yourself, and there always should be some monitoring of yourself, even at a base level. Anyway, I think that McGann's performance there is probably one of the best I've ever seen, and in such a small amount of time, compressed into that time period, it actually is a shame we didn't get to see more of him on screen as compared to the trash that we've now had to suffer through. So in this next scene, from one of everyone's favorite episodes, maybe not because of all the silliness involved, but because of one thing: the Doctor's daughter. An excellent scene. And again, these are just pithy little moments that kind of expose what the Doctor believes, expose how the Doctor feels. And like I said, a lot of these are David Tennant moments because he's had the most opportunities. Matt Smith was the orator, had these big long speeches that really said nothing in a lot of ways, but these moments were the ones that start to unmask who the Doctor is, unmask how he feels and see things, and the conflicting moments that he has during this time period. So let's take a quick watch here.
What's a Time Lord?
It's who I am. It's where I'm from.
And I'm from you.
You're an echo, that's all. A Time Lord is so much more. A sum of knowledge, a code, a shared history, a shared suffering.
And it's gone now, all of it. Gone forever.
There was a war.
Like this one.
Bigger, much bigger.
And you fought. And killed.
Yes.
Now we're going to quickly roll into this next part, but I wanted to just do a quick cut to remind you that The Doctor is always very sullen. That was a painful experience that he had, but yet he still takes identity as a Time Lord in that war. And he makes that mention. There's a shared suffering. There's a shared pain. There's a shared identity in the history of this epic species of what is the Time Lord. And he nails it to the side. Just because you're a clone of me, you are nothing but an echo. Because just being supposedly biologically similar doesn't mean that you can now claim the struggles and the sufferings and the pain that I've had to go through and suffer through. That shared history. But one of the other key thing is that I wanted to bring forth before we continue this next section, because it all kind of ravels together, is how the Doctor fights. What does the Doctor do when he fights? See, it's amazing because they kind of bring this again. I think they may have even used this line that's going to come up in a second later in the Matt Smith era when they talk about the weapon of a Doctor. Because the Doctor's greatest strength, although it doesn't look like it, is that he has a leadership quality. There's something about the Doctor, whether you're a Time Lord, whether you're a human, whether you're something else, that makes you want to follow the Doctor and be led by the Doctor and even sacrifice yourself for the Doctor. And he's cognizant of that, and he exposes that in this scene. And again, it creates the structure and builds who is this personality, because we see him running all the time, fleeing. He's always trying to save lives. He's always trying to protect people. He's always trying to give people an opportunity, particularly David Tennant. I'm a one chance kind of man, which was probably one of the most redeeming qualities about his character, in my personal opinion. However, that type of internal strength that he has is attractive to people and causes people to do things. And we're going to see what that really meant to him in regards to war and fighting and what he's seen.
It's not like I'm an innocent. I've taken lives.
And I got worse. I got clever.
Manipulated people into taking their own. Sometimes I think a Time Lord lives too long.
So there we have, I think, one of the coolest little ellipsis, little turnarounds, the thought process behind that. I've taken lives, and he sees that as taking lives as getting other people. He's not a barbaristic type person. He's not like the Master who just slays endlessly just because he can, because he's in his mind superior to everybody else and just wants to see death. The Doctor's is more insidious, as he would point out. He got clever. He didn't face you face to face on the battlefield and attack you mano to mano, strength to strength. He is very cunning. He instead was able to influence and manipulate other people to sacrifice themselves for him, so that he could get the overall goal accomplished. And that playing back and forth between him and Wilfred is just brilliant. It bringing in that character actually does an excellent job of softening and exposing the Doctor through a gentle male character who was in war, as you find out, and suffers through these same things, and is looking to the Doctor and still recognizing the caliber of man that the Doctor is. So that leads us into, of course, something that was missed, and I understand why. Again, not monologues, but moments that really expose what really runs through the heart of the Doctor is, of course, at the end of time, part 2, where he thinks he's actually alive, the Master's gone, Rassilon and the little cabal of Time Lords over there have been sucked back in. I completely forgot that his mother's in that scene. Brilliant moment, super cool. I've completely forgotten that. It was like, oh, touched my heart. But here we go with the turnaround of he's at that emotional peak where he believes that he's actually alive. He believes that he actually survived, even apart from the prophecy, all that other stuff which he mentioned previously, which we will also bring up a little later after this scene, actually, because I didn't put them in order, because while I do like this scene, I actually think there's a significantly more poignant scene that showcases how he was actually feeling and kind of structures and frames what happens, what we're going to see right now.
I'm sorry.
Okay, right then, I will. Because you had to go in there, didn't you? You had to go and get stuck, oh yes. Because that's who you are, Wilfred. You were always this. Waiting for me all this time.
Oh, really? Just leave me. I'm an old man, Doctor. I've had my time.
Well, exactly. Look at you. Not remotely important. But me? I could do so much more. So much more! But this is what I get. My reward. But it's not fair! Lived too long.
No. No, please. Please don't. No, don't. Please don't! Please!
Wilfred, it's my honor.
Whew, man. That scene gets you every time. It is the ups and downs that are associated with that scene. Again, not exactly fancy dialogue in this scene. There are a couple turnarounds. Of course, you make the connection between I've lived too long, and sometimes I think the Time Lords lived too long from the previous cut. So we kind of bring that full circle into him recognizing what's going on. What you also realize is that previously he expected that he wouldn't be able to regenerate. And so you kind of consider that this, now that you see that he's going to have to die, but he's going to have the opportunity to regenerate, you would consider maybe a bit of an overreaction. Sure, be frustrated, be angry. Here's this person that you've been traveling with and carting around this entire time, connected to Donna through an entire season, and he's been the dark horse. He's been the silent character where you have thought it's always going to be the master. You thought it was going to be some other force that was going to kill you, and it turns out it's someone that you've consoled. It's someone that you've comforted. It's someone that you've even counseled with, who actually is the structure of your demise. Now, it's great storytelling, but to be able to bring and distill all those emotions into what's really just a brief 2.5-3 minute scene with David Tennant Doctor, using very little dialogue and nothing that's very impressive, it wraps all that stuff around, cycling through the hubris again of the Doctor. I'm superior. I'm more important than you. How could it be that then you turn around and betray me? And then again, come back down to earth and recognize what he's saying, how that's going to affect him and the world around him. And then to again humble himself and tell Wilfred, which again, great acting and part. He just draws that teddy bear like, please, you don't need to do this. I understand. It's okay. You're more important. And it's just the juxtaposition of the characters is just so brilliant. That the Doctor humbles himself to say, it would be a privilege. It's an honor to do this for you, to lay down my life, which is a great principle. Again, don't use Doctor Who as principles, but every once in a while, a blind squirrel finds an acorn or whatever type of nut they want to nibble on, is that there is a great honor and privilege, and it's the most deepest form of love for a man to lay down his life for his friends, and for him to turn around someone who's clearly superior, far more beneficial to the universe, far more intelligent, to be betrayed by a friend, unknowingly, but nevertheless still betrayed by a friend, to then turn around and make that sacrifice, particularly when we see the next clip, is actually an astonishing display of mercy and grace and love from the Doctor. Now, again, as I said, I wanted to kind of frame this in the next part, because even though the Doctor regenerates, and he technically isn't dead, and in other incarnations of the Doctor, we've kind of seen a flippant nature to regeneration. It's just kind of a, not really a big deal. And even Matt Smith's character kind of has that same thought process. He knows it's coming. He's old, and it's like, hey, I'm gonna be changing. I'm gonna miss you, but I'm continuing on. The David Tennant Doctor has a significantly different understanding and thought about what that really means, and this is probably one of my favorite scenes in this entire setup. Again, this on the other hand, I think is very poignant dialogue. As simple as it is, this actually has far reaching for the heartstrings, and we'll play it right here.
Even if I change, it feels like dying. Everything I am dies. Some new man goes sauntering away. And I'm dead. No one. Traveling alone. I thought it was better of them. But I did some things that went wrong. I need...
Oh, my word.
Merry Christmas.
Now, in this scene, we'll go from the end of the scene and make our way back to the front. The little turnaround of once he's said what he said, he takes it all back in, breathes it up, gives himself, reconstitutes himself, and then turns around with that, okay, I kind of gave you an emotional dump, but it's not your burden to bear. Merry Christmas. You know, change the subject, redirect to something happy, something joyful, something fun, something exciting, because it was important for him to not lay this burden on, I'm telling you, my studio's falling apart, to lay this burden on Wilfred, who's been here as a compatriot, someone who has been friendly, who's always just adored the Doctor, and also because of the way he took care of Donna. For the Doctor to have that moment of weakness, that I made a mistake, I did something terrible and tragic, and being alone for me is not something I can do, because there's a tyranny that the Doctor will start to naturally turn into, and he'll slowly start to metastasize into a tyrant, because he does need to have the viewpoint of, in his words from the Waters of Mars, lesser people. He needs to be consistently and constantly reminded by that, so that he doesn't start to, in his own mind, ascend to become superior, to become greater, because he could naturally have that inclination. And it's a although the Doctor isn't human, let's be honest, we're writing these characters as humans, and this is something that happens with human beings. Biblically, we have Paul. He talks about that he was taken to the third heaven, but yet he has this thorn in his flesh, so that he will stay humble, because there would be an opportunity for him to stumble and become, I am greater than the other apostles. I'm greater than other Christians, because I've had this opportunity that hasn't been given to anyone else. So he has a humbling addition in his flesh to maintain his humility, to make sure he doesn't start following down those steps. And in similar form, we have the Doctor here, who recognizes when he's alone the opportunity for him not to look at what other people may consider, those who have different thoughts and ways of thinking, who are lesser than him, are good ways for him to set boundaries for himself, so as not to become like, again, another biblical example, like Lucifer, who says, I'm going to put my throne above God's throne. I'm going to ascend to the heights. I'm going to go up to the mountains. I am going to set myself higher than everything that God is and has created. He would have that opportunity. And he did in The Water of Mars, where he made that just choice and decision. And in that scene, we really do see the actual cathartic release of recognizing how destructive and how painful that actually was for him to experience. We see the flashback in The Water of Mars with all the text change and all the stuff, but it's that moment right there when he confesses that to Wilfred, where he finally has that moment of finishing that end, because he recognizes, when I am alone, I will start tending towards a tyrannical mindset, to a superior mindset, and it's just, and he doesn't want that. He wants to stay connected with people, like we've seen with Paul McGann. He loved this. He interacted with Kes for less than 40 seconds, and yet he felt he had disappointed her. He felt that he had failed her, and that is an important qualification to have for someone with internal strength. And then to finalize that scene, we have the Doctor discussing what regeneration actually means to the David Tennant Doctor. As I had said previously, many of the Doctors had kind of seen the regeneration rather flippantly. It's not until the David Tennant Doctor where we see, for him, even enjoying who he is as a person, recognizes that even if he does have the opportunity to regenerate, because he's considering that he's actually going to just die, period, at this time, he as a person does die anyway. The language is perfect. Some new man sauntering, who's nothing like, just saunters off. And I love that. The sauntering part's my favorite, because it's just like, ho-hum, humdrum, I'm changed. And that's exactly what happens when he does regenerate. That is the exact quality clarification, the exact quality, my apologies, structure that the Matt Smith Doctor has. It's this kind of Kermit the Frog, wild, flippant type of personality, very different than the David Tennant one. And it is almost a stark turnaround. And that's how he applies, I'm not dead as a physical being, but the way I think, the way I consider, all the things that have built me and created who I am right now perish. And it's painful. And it's not something I like and want to suffer, particularly thinking how long Matt Smith's Doctor lives in comparison to how long they let David Tennant's Doctor live. Even though he's only in the show for the same amount of time, for 3 years, the experiences the Doctor gets to share, his lifespan there is actually very, very short. And so I think that's one of the most heart-wrenching moments, the pain, the anguish, the suffering, and almost that staring off into saying, what I've done is almost meaningless. Who I am is just washed away and pointless, because I don't get to enjoy the fruits of those things. And I think that's probably one of the most striking scenes that has ever been in Doctor Who. So now we turn around to this. And I'm not going to give it a lot of introduction, other than to say, with complete candor, with my kind of disregard of Matt Smith, while I think this speech is better than all the Matt Smith speeches, it too, in complete candor, falls on its face with the last 3 lines that are spoken. I would say it's a near perfect speech, and yet it still falters, because writing something epic is hard. But this is the only real long string of text from the Doctor that I have in this video that I would consider an actual monologue that I actually think stands the test of time. And why don't we take a peek?
This is a scale model of war. Every war ever fought right there in front of you. Because it's always the same. When you fire that first shot, no matter how right you feel, you have no idea who's going to die. You don't know whose children are going to scream and burn. How many hearts will be broken? How many lives shattered? How much blood will spill until everybody does what they were always going to have to do from the very beginning? Sit down and talk! Listen to me, listen. I just want you to think. Do you know what thinking is? It's just a fancy word for changing your mind. I don't understand. Are you kidding me? Of course I understand. I mean, do you call this a war, this funny little thing? This is not a war. I fought in a bigger war than you will ever know. I did worse things than you could ever imagine. And when I close my eyes, I hear more screams than anyone could ever be able to count. And you know what you do with all that pain? Shall I tell you where you put it? You hold it tight till it burns your hand. And you say this: no one else will ever have to live like this. No one else will ever have to feel this pain.
So, in this speech that's given by Capaldi, and to reset this, other than Matt Smith, the only Doctor that really has had any long-term monologues as a character development has been Capaldi. I've seen other speeches that he's had in other seasons, and to be quite frank, I could only stomach the first season of the Capaldi era because they did a terrible job. The writing was terrible, the way that they structured their companion with Clara was terrible, and what they did to the Doctor was actually a travesty of this character, to keep attacking him and belittling him and berating him for no reason. And to use Capaldi as that guy was pretty insulting, given that this guy had a love for the character of the Doctor and wanted to stick around for 5 seasons and got completely dismissed for this terrible, I thought the Capaldi era was bad enough and I couldn't even get through the next 2 seasons. The most recent stuff has been an absolute joke. But moving that aside, his speech is nearly perfect, and it climaxes in that the unbelievable, probably the most emotional fervor we've actually seen from the Doctor in regards to fighting in the war. We kind of touch upon it with David Tennant. We kind of ignore it actually with Matt Smith, and the 50th anniversary we kind of retouch on it again with the John Hurt asking about how many children were on Gallifrey at that time period, and then you have that little quip by Billy Piper when she's playing the AI saying, that's the Doctor that regrets and the Doctor that forgets. This has probably been, in regards to that entire situation of the war, the highest emotional peak, where he says, and when I close my eyes, I hear more screams than you could count. That is the peak of the mountain. And it's kind of sad because after that climax there at the top, the language that's used starts to quickly fall apart. It would have been better for him just to discuss the burning in his hand and leave it there, but to talk about what you do with all this pain, stuff like that, or to avoid other people having to suffer it. And then I even cut the part because I think it's the worst part of the speech is that "not on my watch" kind of line. Silly. However, moving all that stuff from there, again, I think this is probably one of the most potent portions of Capaldi and even the Doctor's monologues, because it really showcases to you the way he views conflict. Now, a sidebar for that, when you have an aggressor, war is a necessity. If they're not going to come to the table and talk with you, you can't talk with somebody who doesn't want to talk to you. You can't talk with somebody who doesn't care for your rights or your freedoms or your culture or the things that you want to do and merely wants to kill you and take over and rule and dominate over you. You have to fight. You have to engage in wars. So now with that in mind, I'm going to put this speech into the context of frivolous wars. Now, again, with the episode, I wouldn't consider a different kind of alien species invading the Earth as a frivolous war. But again, we'll move that context away, and we can use this speech as context for what we consider frivolous wars, wars that don't need to be had, and instead fighting and aggressing just for the sake of conquest and defeating somebody and just owning someone else's property. I think this is an excellent speech. I think it defines exactly what that means. The flippancy that people will have of let's start a war because it's always someone else's children, someone else's kids, someone else dying for that person who makes that decision. And only one side typically ends up losing the real power, the people who are making those orders. And so to put this as something as simplistic as you touch the box and start this war and it randomly generates who dies, I think is something that science fiction's brought up before. It's actually in Star Trek in the original series, where you have these 2 cities that are warring against each other, and it's all digital. There's actually no real fighting. It's just digital, and the computer will call out, will sections 4 through 7 step into such and such area, and basically they're just incinerators because they've turned war not into the actual painful destructive struggle that it is, but almost completely sanitized it. So it's like, oh, it's like a chess game. I lost my pawn. Oh, well. And him bringing that down and flipping that on its head to, I'm going to reduce what war looks like. And when you touch that button, 50% is going to die. Just over. There's nothing you can do about it. It really brings to the heart of what that means. And then again, he turns it into his own personal war and the personal struggles that he's had in that second part of the speech where he talks about, I don't understand. This is child's play, this little skirmish that you guys are having. I had a war that burned through space and time and destroyed the universe, and I'm the one who had to go in there and with my, Capaldi probably knows, I believe he kind of knew what had happened post the 50th anniversary, but was the one that had to be there to end it and had to be the one that struggled with all that war and pain and suffering throughout that time period. And I think it's excellent. And again, the Capaldi era is some of the worst writing, short of the Jodie Whittaker era. But yet this moment and the way that Capaldi delivers it in this frantic state, in this fatherly state, I cut that little portion of it, talking about a parent forgiving their child as if you're unforgivable by doing these things. But that's exactly how he views it. It's a fatherly mindset that he has. Says, children, please stop. Please stop. You don't need to be doing this. You're hurting me. You're grieving me by doing this. And don't continue doing it because you're like, well, I can never be forgiven or I can never find any type of repentance. It's like, yes, you can. You certainly can. And it doesn't mean there won't be consequences, but you can certainly find repentance and turn around and make a different choice. And again, like I said, I think that climaxes on for his terror and horror when he closes his eyes and hears the blood-curdling screams of all the lives that could not be counted by the humans and by the Zygons. They don't have the minds to comprehend the suffering that he has when he's in the quiet moments of his character. And I think that's the general theme that I have for this entire thing. Monologues are great, passionate speeches are great, even little pithy, sarcastic, sardonic epithets or even large treaties are fantastic, and they do build. But when the Doctor is in those quiet moments in his character, when he has the moment to be interpersonal, I think those are the moments that really define and draw out his character. And he's a man that carries an unspeakable, I should say, an uncharacteristic, indescribable burden. And I think that's what makes his character so inviting. I think it's what makes his character so enticing to watch. The man who shouldn't have to bear these things, who can't bear these things, continuing to push on out of necessity. So those are my speeches and monologues and little short quips. I hope you enjoyed the video. It's a little addendum to what Shepard and Wes Fox put together. I hope you enjoyed it. And folks, we will see you next time.